The first thing he noticed wasn't the panic. It was the silence. In a crowded restaurant, silence doesn't happen naturally. It arrives like a warning. 1 second there's laughter, the clatter of silverware, a child whining about broccoli. The next, everything pulls tight like a held breath no one dares release. Ethan Cole looked up from his daughter's half-eaten grilled cheese, just as a glass slipped from someone's hand and shattered against the floor. "Daddy?" Lily whispered, her small fingers curling into his sleeve. He followed the direction of the frozen stairs. A woman stood near the center of the room, her face pale, one hand clawing at her throat. Her other hand trembled against the edge of a table, knocking over a water glass that spilled unnoticed across polished wood. Her lips moved, but no sound came out. "Choking!" Ethan was already on his feet before the thought fully formed. "Stay here," he told Lily, his voice steady in a way that surprised even him. "Don't move." The distance between them felt longer than it was. People had backed away, some standing, others half risen from their seats, unsure what to do. A man fumbled with his phone. Another called out for help that wasn't coming fast enough. Ethan didn't hesitate. "Ma'am, I'm here," he said, gently but firmly stepping behind her. Her eyes were wide, terrified, locking onto his like he was the last solid thing in a world slipping away. She nodded faintly, her body stiff with panic. "I've got you." "Try to stay still." His arms wrapped around her, one fist just above her navel, the other hand gripping tight. He'd learned this years ago in a basic first aid class he almost skipped. Funny how life tucked away the smallest lessons until the moment they mattered most. He pulled inward and upward. Nothing. Her body jerked, but whatever blocked her airway didn't move. "Come on," he muttered under his breath, adjusting his grip. Again, harder. A sharp gasp broke through the room. Someone else, not her. Ethan felt the clock ticking in the way her body began to weaken, the tension giving way to something far more dangerous. Her knees buckled slightly. "No, stay with me," he urged. One more time. He drove the motion upward with everything he had. And then, a sudden wet sound. A piece of food dislodged, hitting the floor with a soft, almost insignificant tap. The woman collapsed forward, coughing violently, dragging in air like she'd been underwater for too long. The room exhaled all at once. Ethan kept a steady hand on her back, guiding her toward a chair. "Easy, you're okay. Just breathe." She clutched the edge of the table, her shoulders shaking as oxygen rushed back into her lungs. Tears streamed down her face. Not dramatic, not loud, just quiet and unstoppable. "Thank you," she rasped between breaths. I couldn't." "You're all right," he said softly. "That's what matters." A server rushed over with water. Someone else asked if they should call an ambulance. The manager hovered nearby, pale and shaken. Ethan stepped back, giving her space now that the crisis had passed. "Daddy!" He turned just in time to catch Lily as she ran into his arms. "You fixed her," she said, looking up at him with wide, admiring eyes. He smiled, brushing a strand of hair from her face. She fixed herself. "I just helped a little." But when he glanced back, the woman was still watching him, not with the dazed gratitude of someone who'd just survived something. Terrifying, but with something deeper. Something searching. Her name was Claire. He learned that when she approached his table 10 minutes later, composed but still pale, her voice steadier than her hands. "I didn't get a chance to properly thank you," she said. Up close, she looked different than he'd first realized. Not just well-dressed, but refined in a way that hinted at a life far removed from his own. There was a quiet confidence about her. Even now, like someone used to being in control. "Until tonight." "You don't have to," Ethan replied. "Anyone would have done the same." She shook her head slightly. "They didn't." That lingered between them. Lily, never one for silence, spoke up. "My dad's a hero." Ethan chuckled under his breath. "I'm really not." Claire smiled at Lily, her expression softening. "Well, I think he is." There was a pause, then she said, "Can I at least buy your dinner?" Ethan hesitated. Pride flickered instinctively, but then he glanced at Lily, who was already nodding enthusiastically. "All right," he said. "Thank you." What he didn't know, what he couldn't have known, was that the woman standing in front of him wasn't just someone who'd had a bad night. She was someone whose name was whispered in boardrooms, someone whose decisions moved markets, someone who had more wealth than he would earn in 10 lifetimes. But in that moment, she was just a woman who had almost died, and he was just the man who hadn't let her. Their worlds should have drifted apart after that night. That's how these things usually go. Strangers intersect briefly, then return to their separate lives like nothing ever happened. But Claire didn't let that happen. She came back. At first it was small. A message sent through the restaurant manager, asking if Ethan might be open to coffee as a proper thank you. He almost said no. His schedule was tight. His life already full in the way single parenthood demanded. But Lily changed his mind. "You like her," she said one evening, far too perceptive for her age. "I barely know her." "Then you should." So he agreed. Coffee turned into conversation. Conversation turned into something easier, something natural. Claire wasn't what he expected. She listened, really listened, in a way most people didn't. She asked about Lily, about his work, about the small, ordinary details of his life as if they mattered. And when he asked about her, she deflected at first. "I work a lot," she said simply. It wasn't a lie. But it wasn't the truth either. That came later. The revelation didn't arrive with drama. It came quietly, on an afternoon that felt like any other. They were walking through a park. Lily racing ahead toward a set of swings. Her laughter carried on the breeze. Ethan noticed the shift in Claire before she spoke. "There's something I haven't told you," she said. He glanced at her, sensing the weight behind the words. "Okay." She took a breath. "The company I work for, I own it." He frowned slightly. "Own it how?" She met his eyes. "Completely." The name she said next meant little to him at first, but then recognition clicked. He'd seen it in headlines, in passing mentions on the news. A billion-dollar corporation. His steps slowed. "Oh." It wasn't shock that settled in him. It was distance. A sudden awareness of the gap between their lives. "You should have told me," he said, not accusing, just honest. "I wanted you to know me first," she replied softly. "Not that." He looked at her for a long moment. "You think it changes things?" "Does it?" Ethan considered that. Then he shook his head. "It explains your shoes." She blinked. "My shoes?" "The first thing I noticed," he said, a faint smile tugging at his lips. "Definitely not worn thin." For a second she stared at him, then laughed. Really laughed, the sound light and unguarded. And just like that, the distance closed. It wasn't money that brought them closer. It was everything else. It was the way Claire knelt to Lily's level instead of speaking down to her. It was the way Ethan refused to be impressed by things that didn't matter. It was the quiet understanding that kindness wasn't something you performed. It was something you lived. But love doesn't grow without tests, and theirs came sooner than expected. Claire's world wasn't simple. There were expectations, pressures, people who questioned her choices, not in loud, obvious ways, but in subtle glances and careful words. "A man like him?" one colleague said during a meeting, not realizing Claire could hear. "It's unexpected." Unexpected. Like kindness was rare. Like humanity needed justification. Claire didn't respond then. But later that night, she showed up at Ethan's door. Her composure cracked in a way he hadn't seen before. "Tell me this isn't a mistake," she said. Ethan didn't answer right away. Instead, he reached for her hand. "I don't know what your world looks like," he said, "but I know what this feels like." He placed her hand against his chest. "Steady, real. And that's not something I'm willing to walk away from because it's unexpected." Her eyes filled, not with fear this time, but with something stronger. Certainty. The turning point didn't come with a grand gesture. It came with a choice. Claire had an opportunity, one that would take her across the country, deeper into the life she'd built long before Ethan existed in it. It was everything she'd worked for, and everything that might pull her away from him. She stood in that same restaurant where they first met, the memory of that night still lingering in every corner. "You saved my life here," she said. Ethan shook his head gently. "You keep saying that." "Because it's true," she replied. "But not just then." He looked at her, waiting. "You reminded me what it means to live it." Silence settled between them, not heavy this time, but full. "I don't want a life that feels bigger but emptier," she continued. "I want one that feels real." Ethan didn't try to persuade her. Didn't try to pull her in one direction or another. "That decision has to be yours," he said. She nodded. "It is." A year later, the restaurant was just as loud, just as alive. But Ethan noticed the difference immediately. Not the silence this time. The laughter. Lily's laughter brighter than ever as she tugged Claire toward their table. "Come on, you're gonna miss it." "Miss what?" Claire asked, smiling. Ethan stood as they approached, something warm settling in his chest. "Dinner," he said, "and maybe a little surprise." Claire raised an eyebrow. "Should I be concerned?" "Probably," he admitted. Lily grinned. "You're gonna like it." And as they sat down together, no panic, no distance, no expectations weighing them down, Claire realized something simple, something profound. The most important moment of her life hadn't been a deal she closed or a company she built. It had been a quiet act of kindness in a crowded room. A man who didn't know her, who didn't need to, who chose to help anyway. And in doing so, changed everything. Not just for her, but for himself too.